Certainly a pleasure to be here with all of you this afternoon in your beautiful town of Peoria. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I would like to elaborate some on some of my challenging times in my life. Some of the things that I had mentioned in my personal reflection here on the DVD, and whether they be financial, career, or matters of the heart, and in particular how they've deepened my faith. I like to call it faith-driven focus in my personal faith journey. I strive to remind myself that things happen for a reason and in God's perfect timing. And if it's meant for me, it truly will be. And if it's not, it's because it's not in His plan for me. Henceforth, I'd like to share a personal story that I reflect on that reminds me of just that, of God at work in my life. In December of 1998, as a 7-year military veteran with my recently attained bachelor's degree, my family couldn't have been more proud of my accomplishments to that point. But their opinion shifted 180 degrees when I dropped the bombshell that I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to move to LA, leave everything behind, and become an actor. In my family's eyes, I was throwing away everything we had all worked for so long. They had supported me in every way, spiritually, financially, always making sure that I had food on the table and that I was well supported in the days when times were slim. I was nonetheless determined, and the only way that I wasn't moving to LA then was if I was accepted into a graduate acting program at the University of Texas, yet in their eyes I was throwing everything away. It was at that time that I really started to develop my faith-driven focus. It was here that I started to pray differently to both our Blessed Mother through her rosary and St. Joseph both for their intercession and guidance to say on my God-given path. On St. Joseph's Day 1999, I prayed our Blessed Mother Rosary at a local St. Joseph's altar in New Orleans in honor of his sainthood. I prayed for God's will for me, whether it be Los Angeles with a car full of clothes and a dream of becoming an actor, or the University of Texas for graduate school. Basically, I was just praying for whatever his plan was for me, and those are the scariest of times when, at least for me, in my personal journey, when I just sit back and try to trust whatever he has in store for me. Lo and behold, within a few days, I received an acceptance letter from the University of Texas. It had been lost in the mail for several weeks, as the postmark reflected. Clearly, my mother's prayers were also answered, as she did not at all like the idea of my moving to Los Angeles at that time. I did go on to the University of Texas. Whereas I had barely started the program, I was maybe there a couple of months, I then flew to New York for an audition for the first of 2 projects I were to do, warranting my withdrawing from the acting track graduate school there at the University of Texas and begin working. The plan then changed to move into LA after that work aired. At this point, it was different, and by this time I did indeed have my family's blessings, and I had showed at least some level of success in my chosen career path in pursuing a career as an actor. When first moving to LA, as so many others, I waited tables, I bartended, bus tables, drove as a private chauffeur, so many things to try to make ends meet and just try to live the dream and keep the dream alive, better yet put. After a couple of years went by in LA, it was a rude awakening when I found myself sleeping on the floor of an office building on a cold floor with very, very thin carpet. It was the office floor of the limousine company for which I was working for. And bless his heart, my boss at the time, he and my brothers were pretty much the only ones that knew that I was actually sleeping there. And he would actually leave me food out and just make sure that I had a pulse, had something to eat, and kind of left the rest up to me to kind of find my way in those days. I slept on the floor of that building for several weeks. I woke up at 5 in the morning, and whereas I would wake up at 5 o'clock, I'd go to the gym and work out, yeah, but more importantly, I would shower, brush my teeth, and shave, and be all cleaned up by the time anyone would be any the wiser that I was sleeping on an office floor. After a few weeks gone by, nonetheless, I received a call, and it was for an audition for Without a Trace. It was one of the first auditions I had had in my professional career in LA, and I remember thinking, okay, this is it. Now, this is where it's all going to pay off. It's pay dirt, and then I'll be able to write a book. And then had this whole dream, and it was lined up starting from that audition. And this particular story, nonetheless, had a different Hollywood ending. It ended with me in tears, the minute I got into the privacy of my own car, because quite frankly, the audition went horribly. I didn't know what I was doing, and I walked in and I felt so belittled by the time that I left, and I felt that it was a complete train wreck and a waste of everyone's time that was in the room. Yes, I still had my own car by this time, but I no longer had reverse, just so you know, and thankfully LA is kind of hilly, so it works. I mean, it makes it interesting, but not impossible to kind of get around. But throughout all these times, I still had an expectant heart that things would work out, and in a weird way knew that it wasn't time for me to give up on my dream. It's that same faith-driven focus, and although my mom to date doesn't know about my sleeping on the floor, a couple weeks after that audition, I found myself at a loss. But I still had her support and the moral support of all of my family back in New Orleans. And for some reason, it was okay sleeping on that floor. I was eating every day, and things were kind of moving forward in some way. And I was really praying for some type of divine intervention, some type of sign that I was where I needed to be. And a couple of weeks later, I had another audition, and this one was for a Sears commercial. I booked the Sears commercial as a carpenter. Little did they know I had been sleeping on the carpet the night before and didn't make it to the gym that morning before my audition, which explained the scruff. Had I known the scruff trick like 2 years earlier, I could have probably skipped the whole chapter of the floor altogether. But nonetheless, that's when things began to change. And from that point forward, I began to be a working actor and just to kind of make ends meet through my craft. And just as the momentum continued on, I am from New Orleans, and Hurricane Katrina rolled through the Gulf Coast, and that was a very sobering day for me. A crossroads, because I didn't know whether to stay in LA and keep pursuing my craft and follow my dream that things seemed to be coming to fruition, or go back to my family and help just however I could, really. Nonetheless, I drove down to New Orleans the day the levees broke, and what was intended for a 2-week trip turned into about a 6-month trip. The revenue from my commercials that I had shot in Los Angeles is what paid for me to be in New Orleans and kept the bills paid while there until I had done all I could pretty much do in the city before I headed back to the grind in Los Angeles. As an actor, I was rusty at best. So shortly after returning to LA, as a means to start polishing up my craft, I started auditioning for a few different plays, and I performed in a play with not only a great actress, but a great person who incidentally shares the same Catholic faith that we do. I, too, began studying acting where she studied, and it was there that I learned to work in the manner that I work now. And as a result of my work there, after leaving and coming back, I booked a small role on CSI. I really don't know how, to tell you the truth, because I was shaking like a leaf when both auditioning and when actually filming it, when we were actually on set. Nonetheless, a week later after that, I had another audition, again for Without a Trace, and it was with the same casting director with whom 3 years earlier seemed like the worst day of my life. Truthfully, it was actually one of the best days of my life, because the second time coming in, I was a bit more seasoned and I actually knew what I was doing, and it made a difference, and I booked it. Ironically, as a carpenter, yet again as a carpenter. And since then, I continue to work on film and TV projects both in New Orleans and Los Angeles, and it's just great because I'm able to spend time with my family when in New Orleans and at the same time continuing my growth as an actor when both in New Orleans and Los Angeles. Although always put to a test, I continue to trust in the power of our Blessed Mother's Rosary. It's truly changed my life, and I just trust that things are happening for a reason and happening in God's perfect timing. If it's meant for me, it will be, and otherwise, well, it's simply just not part of His plan for me. I still wake up at 5 in the morning or so, and whether it's to work out or sometimes just pray in thanksgiving that I'm getting out of a bed rather than off of the floor of an office building. It's truly by the grace of God that I'm doing what I love to do. More importantly, I feel that it's my calling and my vocation and don't want to take it for granted. As part of my faith-driven focus and as I continue in my own personal faith journey, I couldn't be more honored to share my story with you, just as I try to share my faith through my work as an actor whenever possible. I'd like to thank Bishop Jenke for inviting me to be with you, and Father John, Father Willie, and the rest of the Holy Cross Family Ministry staff, thank you as well for affording me the opportunity to do so. Muchísimas gracias. God bless.